I'm Rick Alton. This is We Don't Color on the Dog. We got with the state representative, Alex Andrade. Alex, thank you for joining us.
Hey, good morning, Rick.
Yeah, you had busy weeks in Tallahassee with committee meetings.
Yep.
It's been interesting to watch. News came out yesterday that you finally been able to really show that big settlement, Medicaid settlement, that all of a sudden Hope Florida Foundation got $10 million sliced off wasn't lagniappe. It was really part of the settlement. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, Rick. So if you remember when all of this came to light earlier this year, back in April, this was a Medicaid settlement. This was a reclaimed funds from a Medicaid contractor for overbilling that we were collecting. It's the same as any other Medicaid claim when the state goes asserts, hey, this may not have been criminal, but this was, proper use of Medicaid funds. You need to return to the state. And for whatever reason, Governor DeSantis bent over backwards to try and argue that they negotiated a worse deal for the state than Centene had offered them 4 years earlier, right? So since 2021, Centene had been offering to pay the state $67 million. And the state just sat on it, didn't care about it until suddenly in September of last year, at the same time DeSantis was desperate to use any resource available to him or any resource in a state agency to try and fight the abortion amendment and the marijuana amendments that were on the ballot in November. They suddenly said, Centene, you know what? Send the state $57 million in 2024 and send 10 over to this Hope Florida Foundation. Bizarrely, they kept trying to argue that this was on top of what they'd negotiated and they negotiated a good deal. And I'm sitting here like the math is pretty simple. They offered you $67 million in 2021. And now suddenly you're saying that we should be thankful for a $57 million payment in 2024. It was a patently ridiculous argument from them. And then on top of that, they tried to argue that this $10 million that went to the foundation wasn't Medicaid money. I know, and you know, and everybody else with a brain can understand that if it's a Medicaid claim, it's from a Medicaid contractor whose only work in the state is Medicaid, it's Medicaid money.
Right.
And so since April, after I received a bizarre letter from Andrew Sheeran, ACA, the state agency's attorney, making pseudo-legal, the legal equivalent of pseudoscience argument about how this $10 million wasn't Medicaid money, I said, okay, tell me how much you're paying the feds back. Because every dollar that we get back from a Medicaid claim like this or a Medicaid fraud claim, we have to pay the feds back their portion of the Medicaid dollar. So the federal government pays about 57 cents of every dollar we spend in our Medicaid program in Florida. So when we get money back, regardless of the amount, we have to pay the feds back 57% of whatever we get back. So I said, okay, you say it's not Medicaid money. How much are you paying the feds? And wouldn't you know it, last week we confirmed that after Centene made its final payment to the state, because mind you, there were 3 total payments the state required Centene to make in this settlement. They said you have 5 days to pay the Hope Florida Foundation this money. It was the only payment they required to be made before the election, mind you.
Wow.
They then said you have 45 days to pay the state half of what you owe the state. And then you have a year after that to pay the state the final amount. So I had to wait until November to confirm that the second payment to the state was made. And then I had to wait a couple more weeks to see what ACA did with it. And turns out they paid $38 million back to the federal government. $38 million is 57% of a $67 million settlement. Ultimately, for those who don't like math, potentially, it means that when James stole $10 million from this settlement and funneled it to his PAC, he also put the state of Florida, the taxpayers, on the hook to pay the feds back the $6 million we owed on the 10 that he stole. James didn't steal $10 million from Floridians. He has now officially stolen $16 million from Florida taxpayers.
So for our viewers, and I'm going to back up one more time because I think it's a real important point, Alex, that you're making, is that Hope Florida Foundation got their $10 million. They immediately, within a matter of days, sent it out to 2 nonprofits who then funneled it to Uthmeyer's PAC. But that whole $10 million is gone. So
yeah,
you're right. So the states, the federal government's share of that $10 million has to come out of the taxpayers' pockets. It's like you said, $10 million becomes a $16 million money laundering scheme. Or alleged money laundering scheme. This is What is fascinating with me about it is that why the governor hadn't distanced himself from this.
Well,
Conflate it with his wife's charity effort, and he could separate this pretty. Could have done it at the very beginning and said this isn't what we wanted to have happen, but he hadn't.
well, yeah, DeSantis really hasn't talked about it since May.
Mm-hmm.
I think at some point in the interim between April and today, he's gotten a little bit more informed, and that's why you don't see him talking about it anymore. I mean, back in May, he was willing to call me a jackass and say all these things. He's been quiet ever since. And when this grand jury was announced in Tallahassee, the state level grand jury was announced in Tallahassee, his comment was he had nothing to say, he had no comment. So I think at some point between April and today, he's realized that either the facts are pretty well established, or he really didn't know that James Meyer was doing all this behind his back, and he finally put the pieces together to know that, James absolutely took $10 million in Medicaid money and laundered it to his own PAC. I don't know if DeSantis knew anything, but I do know that his tone has changed since May on the topic. This grand jury at state level, it's still going on. We don't know when we'll get the results from it. Just based on timing and knowing, how lawyers and judges' calendars work, I could guess maybe we'll get the results in early January. But what I do know now, and what I've been pretty consistent on, is until we knew whether or not ACA was going to admit that this $10 million was Medicaid money, I didn't think you'd see any activity from the federal government. And you may never see activity from the federal government. But at this point, now that ACA's admitted it was Medicaid money, me personally, I'd be surprised if the DOJ didn't take it seriously. I mean, this is $10 million in Medicaid funds that were funneled to a PAC. It would kind of be surprising to me if the DOJ did not take this seriously at this point.
Well, and Meyer is Attorney General, and he is going to be running for election next year. It's disheartening when your top legal person in the state, the one who's supposed to protect all of us and hold government accountable and vendors accountable and all of us accountable, is in the middle of something like this.
Speaking of disheartening, I could not imagine being an attorney in James Meyer's Medicaid fraud control unit right now. I mean, like, anybody I'm investigating for Medicaid fraud has stolen less than my boss from this program. You know what I mean? Like, it's mortifying to think about being a lawyer like that, knowing your boss has stolen more than anyone you're investigating right now.
All right, let's change topics a little bit. This week, the governor really once again went after the House, and really feeling again that the House, you weren't named, but you're part of the leadership that aren't living up to, that everybody ran on him, and that not backing his efforts and not supporting him is somehow disloyal to the voters. I mean, that's my take on it. How do you see this?
Yeah, DeSantis has a bigger ego than even I realized. I mean, every single piece of legislation he's ever signed, we've had to pass. He takes credit for ideas that we've come up with over the years. He's claimed, to be the staunchest and bravest conservative. We've had maybe 3 really true public policy disagreements since I've been in office. And I got elected the same year he did, right? So maybe 3 in 8 years. So for him to act like we're not conservatives when his entire record depends on what we sent to him in our legislation, it's just kind of pathetic. He can whine, he can be a narcissist, he can bloviate, he can mislead about what we've done in the Florida legislature. But at the end of the day, I don't see a track record for him as governor of being a great executive. I see a track record of him taking credit for our work. So he can continue copying our homework if he wants, or I guess now whine about, us not doing or giving him exactly what he wants. But at some point, God willing, in the next year before he gets kicked out of office, he will hopefully internalize the fact that we have 2 separate branches of governments. We have 3, with the judiciary, but he's not a legislator, and his complaints about what we're doing are just they're misplaced. It's tough not to start feeling bad for him, though, kind of knowing what he's looking at after he terms out as governor.
Well, that'll be what we'll all be watching. Alex, thank you for coming on today. We'll catch you. Do you have another week of committee meetings in Tallahassee?
Yeah, we'll be over there one final week before the new year, so we'll be over there next week and try and wrap some stuff up before session.
Okay, great. Have a great weekend, Alex.
About that man, and you see, we're just
that.